going on, ladies and gentlemen? This is Gligar here, back again finally with the new mic, bringing you people the week 6 of the free agency and trade transactions. Once again, to those that are unaware of how this works, the week 1 of the free agency and trade transactions will be linked down below in the description where the rules are thoroughly explained. So feel free to check it out and come back to this video if you want to know the rules. Now, right off the bat, this week had a lot of trades made. So let's start off with Gubs, who funnily enough, 1 week after obtaining Poliwrath, decided to trade it for Gigalith. And quite frankly, it would be an understatement to say that I was surprised. I mean, it's not every day that you see a coach make a trade only to drop it the next freaking week. But the thing is, I'm quite skeptical about Gubs' choice, to be perfectly honest. I mean, through the loss of Poliwrath, whatever matchup advantages that he had going on for him have now been taken away from him. Because now, he literally has no secured switch-ins for Malvone's Weavile. Because even a fully physically defensive Gigalith can't take 2 Life Orb low kicks from this monster. And don't get me started on Fizz's Tyranitar, because now his only switch into Tyranitar's stabs is Lucario, which was never built to take hits in the first place. Even Gliscor isn't a reliable answer either, considering that Tyranitar has access to both Ice Punch and Ice Beam. Therefore, I do think that the probability of Gubs having a hard time to plan for these threats is actually very high. But that doesn't necessarily mean that Gubs isn't gaining anything from this trade, as Gigalith does offer some nice little niches for his team. And one of them is the fact that through carrying out this trade, the handicap of having only Gliscor as his Stealth Rocker is now gone, which means that he now has the liberty to run whatever set he pleases on his Gliscor. And considering that this is the league format that we're talking about, Gigalith's capabilities do as a matter of fact increase by a large margin, because it does actually have access to Heavy Slam, which easily 2-shots defensive Clefable and has a 43.8% chance to OHKO offensive Clefable, meaning that Gigalith will come out on top of the exchange 1v1, unless of course Hayden's Clefable happens to be offensive Life Orb. And considering that Clefable, particularly the offensive Life Orb variant, does do a number to his squad, I'd say he needs as many ways as possible to deal with it. Not only that, but Gigalith can also be a fantastic suicide lead for Gubs, considering that it can set up Rocks turn 1, and with the Custap Berry Explosion, with the 135 base attack to complement it, it can do some serious damage. Although I'd still have to say that since this is the league format, the coaches will be fully aware of it and may have a plan to counteract this strategy that they've been doing throughout these past few weeks with this Frostlass. So all in all, it'll be interesting to see how he performs now that he has made this trade. Speaking of Frostlass, it is the last Pokemon that Gubs decided to drop for Cofagrigus, and quite frankly, as far as benefits go, he does now have a defensive Pokemon that won't face the drawbacks when it comes down to having a quad weakness, which we also happening to his Gliscor for these past couple of weeks. And he does now have another Pokemon that can set up Toxic Spikes, meaning that for what it's worth, his Tentacruel will also now have the liberty to run whatever set it pleases. That is if Gubs decides to try to run a hazard stacking approach with Toxic Spikes, because Cofagrigus can fill that role. Its capabilities don't end here either, because it can also play the role of a bulky setup sweeper, as it can set up Calm Minds to boost its nice specially defensive stat of 105 and its base special attack stat of 95, which is pretty decent. So maybe after you see some certain threats go down, you may just end up seeing a Cofagrigus sweep. But then again, Cofagrigus does have some subpar coverage, so in a sense, I do actually see it hindering its sweeping capabilities. However, once Cofagrigus has done what it needs to do and is in the range of HP where it can live the very next hit, it can easily go for Destiny Bond and get outpaced and kill the very next turn, thereby taking down the opposing Pokemon with it, which will make the user hesitant to attack, thereby paving the way for it to set up another layer of Toxic Spikes or even burn something else with Will-O-Wisp. However, one of the main drawbacks present in Cofagrigus is the fact that it does not have reliable recovery, as its only way to get its HP back up is through pain splitting or resting, which I do actually see coming back to cause troubles for Gubs in the long run. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens now, don't we? Next up, we have Nips, aka the coach of the Long Island Reggie Rockies, who decided to trade his Gligar for Flygon. And as far as offensive presence goes, I'd say that it does benefit Drew in a certain way, because now he has another Pokemon to set up Dragon Dances and potentially sweep late game. Although the argument can be made that his team already does have enough offensive presence, I'd personally say that Flygon can actually fill a defensive role, specifically because of its typing. And while Gligar is hands down a much more superior Pokemon when it comes down to defense, I wouldn't necessarily say that Drew made a bad choice, because if he plays his cards right, this may just make his team much more threatening. It also must be mentioned that his former defensive core of Chansey and Gligar both relied on Eviolites to carry out their roles effectively, which means that the opponent will do everything within his power to capitalize on that handicap. So Drew could very well have his own Flygon to cover up for it, which is why I further support this trade. It also has reliable recovery too, since it can actually boost its HP back up and also gets defogged, meaning that he still has a way to get rid of hazards now that he has lost his Gligar. And he still does have a Mega Slowbro to top it off. So I'd say that the loss of defense, courtesy of Gligar, can easily be atoned for by that Beyblade. However, if there's any drawback that I can see from this trade, it is the fact that now he only has his fat pink piece of egg cancer, Chansey, to set up rocks, which I do believe will hinder his team building capability up to a certain extent, and also make it much more easier for his opponents to plan for him, since they know that Chansey is going to appear 100% of the time and will always pack stealth rocks, unless of course Drew decides to give up on setting up rocks as a whole, which would be quite weird. All in all, there are benefits along with drawbacks when it comes down to this trade, and I for one most definitely look forward to seeing what's next for the Long Island Regirockies. Now, on to the final set of trades, which were made by none other than the mayor of Crimson City, Crimson Seabad, who chose to give up his Registeel for Credilli. And truth be told, this does give him some advantages, one of them being the fact that he now has an immunity to water types as a whole, which is offensive threats by the name of Crocodile, Infernape, and obviously non-bulky Zardex were weak to. Even his checks to these water types such as Electros, Roserade, and Latios wouldn't necessarily appreciate Scald Burns, which is why through having Credilli, that is now fixed. It also has reliable recovery, which Registeel didn't have, and it is more flexible than Registeel, because it can actually set up curses to boost its defensive stat, and with a specially defensive stat of 107 to cover up the special side, Credilli can actually become Crimson's bulky setup sweeper. That, and it does have access to Mirror Code, which may just make the opponent hesitant to go for a special attack on it, especially in cases where they barely miss out on the KO. So from a psychological point of view, I'd say that Crimson is getting benefited from it. But the main drawback I see from this trade is the fact that through the loss of Registeel, his team does actually struggle a lot against Ice types in general, as he now has 5 weaknesses to Ice type attacks and only 2 resistances to it, where one of them isn't even a defensive mon. So I think it's pretty self-explanatory of how bad it is for him. That is until he decided to make his last trade, and that is by giving up his Audino for Glaceon. To be fair, I do actually see where he is coming from, because now Glaceon is his go-to mon for Ice types in general. And just like Audino, it can play its role as a cleric, along with the fact that it does have a nice special attack of 130, something that Audino actually lacked. So when it comes down to offense, it is quite beneficial for Crimson. It also has access to Baton Pass as well, meaning that it can actually help in keeping the momentum on Crimson's side. But, and by but I mean a very huge but, that's what he said, it must be noted that as far as defensive typing goes, Ice typing isn't necessarily the best. I mean, Ice types in general have only one resist, and that is Ice itself. It doesn't resist any other typing as a whole, and while the same argument can be made for normal types, it must be noted that Ice types are weak to a total of 4 types as a whole, along with the fact that for a defensive mon, it won't necessarily appreciate switching it on Stealth Rocks. That and the loss of a Regenerator mon is very huge for Crimson, and on the basis of that, along with the other handicaps, I'd say that Glaceon will have a much more difficult time to play its role as a cleric. To top it off, while it does have a very nice special attack stat, its coverage is pretty subpar too. So I don't know how to feel about this trade, to be honest, because while the addition of Glaceon is fixing a problem for the Detroit Steel Wings structure-wise, it is also creating new holes for the opponent to capitalize on. But once again, it is Crimson's actions that will lead to whether this trade works out for him or not. So yeah, we're just gonna have to wait and see. Something that I've probably mentioned for God knows how long. But yeah, that's basically it for this week's free agency and trade transactions. Once again, thank you so much for watching, guys. I sincerely hope that the experience has been much more enjoyable this time now that I have a new mic. And on a personal note, to the GBA viewers that said it, thank you for telling Joey that I'm an analyst for the GBA. In the end, I'm just like each and every single one of you, and that is a fan. And to have you amazing GBA fans say that to him and recognize me as one of the analysts of the GBA really does mean a lot to me. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you. So with that being said, do let me know in the comment section down below what you think of this trade, and your friendly neighborhood starter man will see you next time. Stay awesome and take care. Bye bye.